continue with our reading of Pilgrims Progress. Now Christian had not gone far into the valley of humiliation before he heard the ominous flappings of some monstrous bat's wings. Casting about him fearfully, he espied swooping down from the north a foul fiend. "Oh no," he cried out in terror. As the evil apparition drew near, it circled round behind Christian and growled with a guttural voice. "Halt where you stand, vile traitor. This is surely the worst evil I have met with yet. What shall I do?" "I'll tell you what to do, foolish fugitive," snarled the fiend, as he deliberately folded huge leathery wings after having settled to the earth amid a roiling cloud of dust. "Flee from my wrath to come, lest I devour you." Now the monster whose name in the Greek is Apollyon was most hideous to behold, being clothed with scales like a fish, having wings like a dragon and the feet of a bear. Out of his belly fire and smoke belched up through his nostrils, and his mouth was as the mouth of a lion. So Christian began to consider with himself what to do, saying, "What to do? Shall I run back or stand my ground?" "You have no choice," roared the beast, belching forth a cloud of sulphurous smoke. "Run, weak and feeble pilgrim, one whilst you may." Well, you can be sure that this command Christian was very much inclined to obey, until he remembered that pilgrims are not provided with armor for their backs. And recalling the treacherous difficulties coming into humility, he quickly recognized the deadly perils of attempting a retreat back out. Therefore, to turn back must certainly prove to be the death of him. Therefore, he planted his feet firmly and said boldly, "No, I must stand my ground. O Lord of the hill, be with me." Now Apollyon was quite taken aback by the boldness of this pilgrim, who he had taken to be no more than a common traveler who could easily be frightened back. He was also startled and pained in his ears to hear Christian cry out to his king so early in the encounter. Therefore, seeing that this pilgrim was impregnable to his fiery darts, having just put on the whole armor of God, you see, he was loath to run the risk of a direct attack. He therefore determined to use flattery and threats mixed with a good dose of diabolical deceit. With these subtle weapons of hell, he hoped to disarm the man. Before resorting to more violent measures, he began his attack by softening his harsh demeanor and addressing Christian with the voice of Eden's gentle serpent, saying, "Whence from and whither bound, O gentle traveler?" "I flee from the city of destruction, and I am bound for the land of Zion," Christian replied suspiciously, trying to look and sound more bold on the outside than he felt on the inside. "The city of destruction, do you say?" snapped Apollyon. "Well then," he hissed, squinting his eyes to narrow slits while pointing a sharp eagle's claw at Christian's breast, "since I am prince and god of that land, that makes you one of my subjects." "Nay, I am not." "Ah, but you are," he countered with mounting anger. "You are mine by birth and by life, and for your attempted escape you deserve that I should smite you to the ground. I only hesitate," said he, calming himself a bit, "because I hope to gain yet further and better service from you." "I shall never serve you again," shot back Christian instinctively, fingering the haft of his sword. "And why not?" demanded the fiend, casting furtive glances at Christian's sword hand. "Because your services were hard, and your wages were such as a man could not live on." "What? Do you dare complain of my wages?" "Yes," he cried, pointing at an accusing finger, "because the wages of sin is death. Therefore I have chosen to serve another master whose yoke is easy and whose burden is light. A master whose wages are eternal life." Now, as Christian pointed the accusing finger and spake boldly for his new master, Apollyon quailed and shrank back a few inches before shouting, "There is no prince that will lose his subjects without a battle, and I be no exception, graceless." "My name be Christian," announced the pilgrim proudly, But this the giant ignored, and once more adopting a friendly manner said, "But hey, dear Graceless, being by nature a kind and reasonable prince, I will give you an opportunity to go back in peace. If you do, I promise you easier work and better wages as our country can afford." "And why do you offer me such good wages?" asked Christian warily. "I be but a common man." Nay, he said, assuming his sweet serpent's voice. "Now that you have been a pilgrim, you can render me tenfold service by your fine example in turning back. That is how I can afford your raise." "'Tis too late," shot back Christian. "'Tis never too late, dear Graceless," crooned the fiend. "Come back with me and be wise." "Nay," said Christian nobly, "for I have betrothed myself to the King of Kings. I should be dishonest thus to betray him." "Bah! Sheer nonsense," snorted Apollyon, spewing a tongue of orange flame through a ring of acrid yellow smoke for effect. "'Tis a common thing for his professed followers to serve him for a time, and then come fawning back to me. Do you the same now, and all shall be well with you." At this base suggestion, Christian said indignantly, "I have given him my faith, and sworn him my allegiance. How then can I turn back and not be hanged as a traitor?" "Pah!" flamed the monster with a roar. "You have done the same to me, and hanging is better than you deserve. But," crooned the fiend, regaining control and slithering the sweet voice of the servant between the clenched teeth of a grinning lion, "because I be so kind and fair, I am willing to let bygones be bygones and forgive your grievous injuries. You need only turn you about and strike out for home. So you can pierce my back with fiery darts? Oh no, not that. I was only thinking of your comfort. Surely you would not want to back your way out of humility." "Thank you, but no thank you." Then Apollyon, losing all pretended patience with kindness, which he was much averse to use anyway, since it tended to make him nauseous, put aside his serpent's voice and roared as a lion, saying, "But you were born into my service. You have made me promises." "Promises gotten by deceiving a child before he knew a better way. You have sinned much, though." "Aye, so I confess," admitted Christian with no little shame. But then, remembering the cross and how his burden had tumbled into the sepulchre, he stood tall and refused to shoulder it again. Instead, he said proudly, "But my new master has power to absolve and to pardon what I did whilst deceived into your service. More than that, he has the power to keep me from falling. I need never serve you again, Apollyon, ever." At this powerful onslaught, Apollyon cringed behind a leathery wing momentarily before roaring back, "No, lies, all lies." "No, 'tis very true," countered Christian, growing more bold yet. "No," bellowed the fuming beast with an involuntary shudder. "And," continued the pilgrim fearlessly, "to tell the truth more plainly, I find his service easier, his wages higher, his servants kinder, his government fairer, his company sweeter, and his country lovelier than yours." "No," hissed the fiend. "No, no, no. Therefore, stop trying to deceive me. I am his, and he is mine. I am of that number that will follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth." Meeting with such ill success, using mere guilt and guile, Apollyon thought it better to appeal to the man's natural fear of pain, saying, "Better think about what lies ahead, and reconsider whilst you may, Graceless. Think of the many who have gone before you, only to meet with shameful and painful deaths." "Aye," said Christian, resting his hand on his sword. "But blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." This sharp thrust springing from the heart of the word made the fiend wince and blink serpentish eyes a few quick times. Fearing lest this unusual pilgrim might continue his deadly thrusts, he cast a quick glance behind him to spy out a path of easy escape. Then said he with feigned contempt, "This prince of whom you speak so glibly is but a paper prince." "Nay, not so. Yea, 'tis so," accenting his words with a puff of smoke. "All the world knows how I have rescued my subjects from him, either by fraud or by force, and so will I do to you. He shall preserve me. Pah! Name one time when he has come in person to deliver his own." "Well, how about when he stood in the flames with the 3 Hebrews? Pah! Thousands of years ago," roared Apollyon, visibly disconcerted. Then belching forth a sheet of flame enveloped in a yellow-gray cloud of sulphurous smoke, he wrung his beclawed paws and said with fiendish delight, "But now we slow roast them at the stake, and he does not so much as lift a finger whilst they writhe in the flames." "While they sing in the flames, you mean," countered Christian, proudly. "And this they can do because he bears their pain in his own flesh. And more than that, they lay down their lives willingly, knowing that they shall inherit all the more glory when he comes with his angels." "And do you hope to partake of said glory?" asked Apollyon, seeing a possible avenue of new attack. "Aye, 'tis already mine, if I will be but faithful unto death." "And why do you expect such godly wages, seeing you have already been so unfaithful?" hissed the demon slyly. "When?" Then the fiend proceeded to list every sin, every stumble, and every doubting that he had ever seen Christian fall into, saying, "When you took your eyes off the light and fell into the slough of despond, when you went up to Sinai to be rid of your burden rather than waiting for your Lord to remove it in the proper manner, when you sinfully slept and lost your precious roll, and when you were almost persuaded to go back at the mere mewings of toothless lions." Then Christian's mouth went dry as he realized that the fiend possessed an exact account of every sin he had ever committed. This made him grateful indeed to remember that he had already sincerely repented. Yea, he had turned from his sins and sent them on ahead to the heavenly sanctuary where Christ did minister in his behalf. "Aye," he confessed, "all is true. Besides, many fears and thoughts that you know nothing of. But I have repented of those foolish mistakes and have learned from them. My prince has forgiven me and given me power to do better." "Grugh!" snarled Lion Mouth with a sheet of flame. "I am an enemy to this prince. I hate his person, his laws, and his people. And I have come out of my den for the express purpose of stopping you. Turn or burn, Graceless." Christian, seeing that the words had come to an end, drew his sword, lowered his visor, and gave Apollyon fair warning, saying, "Apollyon, in the name of the Lord, I declare that I am in the king's highway, the way of holiness. Here nothing can befall me except my Lord's permission. Therefore be careful what you do, for in opposing me, you oppose my prince." Now flattery, deceit, and threats having failed him, Apollyon fell back upon those familiar weapons that he better knows how to wield, namely fear, torture, and death. Therefore he straddled a path that there could be no passage unless Christian should go out of the way, and this was the challenge that he flung out to Christian. "I despise thy prince, and I am void of fear in this matter. Prepare yourself to die, Graceless, for I swear by my infernal den that you shall go no farther. Here will I spill thy soul." And with that he slung a flaming dart at Christian's breast. But Christian had long since put his shield at the ready, and so saved himself. "So," challenged Christian, "first words of flattery, then evil threatenings, and now it has come to combat, has it? Then in the name of the Lord of the Hill and in his power, I stand against you, O destroyer and accuser of the brethren." Then did Apollyon attack with all his infernal skill, throwing darts as thick as hail. By these Christians was wounded in his head, his hand, and foot. "Run for your life, weak coward," snarled the fiend as he searched for a chink in Christian's armor. "Nay," he cried out, skillfully parrying another flaming dart and countering with a swift thrust of his glittering sword. "Though I die on the spot, I will stand my ground. Ha! You are thrice wounded, feeble warrior. Your blood spills on the ground and you are falling back. Your Lord is ashamed of you." "Nay," declared Christian, "but proud, for I do the best I can. Let me pass, for you are a defeated foe." "So you say," growled the beast, his bold facade beginning to wilt before the sharp arrows of painful truth. "No," he shouted, punctuating his words with a slash of his sword. "Not I, but my books. Therefore I will depend on the word to do what it says." "And what does it say?" Apollyon challenged thoughtlessly to his instant regret. Then declared Christian boldly, "It tells me that if I turn to God and resist the devil, he shall flee from me. Therefore back off, foul fiend." Christian, taking new courage from the word, resolved to play the man and began to gain new ground. Now the fierceness of this combat no man can imagine. Apollyon belched smoke like a dragon, fiercely roaring and hideously screaming the whole time of the conflict. And oh, what sighs and groans did burst from poor Christian's heart. Now this violent combat lasted for over half a day, and Christian, because of his wounds, found himself growing weaker and still weaker. Apollyon, seeing opportunity for a kill, began to circle tighter round and round so as to make Christian dizzy. Then, seizing upon a weak moment, he rushed in like a flood, caught hold of Christian, and with a skill born of centuries of wrestling with flesh and blood, gave him a brutal throw to the ground. This knocked the breath from Christian's breast and sent his sword skittering just out of reach. "Aha!" gloated Apollyon, savoring the moment. "No sword! Now shall I show you what I do to traitors." Then Apollyon, seeking to prolong and deepen the suffering of death, pressed himself upon Christian to crush out his life and to smother him with sulphurous breath. "Dead man, graceless," he fumed, hot into his face. "You are a dead man." And so it seemed, for Christian could scarcely find air to breathe, and what little air he could suck in was so befouled and sulphurous that it seared his lungs and turned his vision a blurry gray. Seeing that his situation was beyond hope, as did Jacob in his trouble, Christian yielded up his earthly life and committed the keeping of his soul to God. But it was not in God's plan to lose such a brave pilgrim so early on his journey. Therefore, as Apollyon arrogantly reached for his last fiery dart, God filled Christian with a new supply of hope and strength. Instantly, Christian's mind and vision cleared, and in good hope, he reached out his hand, praying that God would guide it to his sword. Apollyon, already enjoying sure victory, only smirked a lion-lipped grin for the joy of seeing Christian's hand desperately stretching, scratching, searching, and clawing for his weapon. "Dead man, sword seeker," he hissed hatefully. "Nothing but a dead man." Then Christian touched the haft of his sword with the tip of his finger and felt a new thrill of hope surge through his breast. But stretch and struggle as he might, his reach still exceeded his grasp. Apollyon, gloating over Christian's futile efforts, sneered triumphantly and then pressed his entire bone-crushing weight onto Christian's chest. Hissing and fuming sulphurous breath into his face, he taunted Christian, saying, "Your master has left you to die, graceless. Your sword lies but half an inch away, and your heavenly lover leaves it lie. You are a fool." Thus did Apollyon seek to send Christian to a hopeless grave. But still with heaven-born faith, Christian continued to flail about for that precious weapon, so near and yet so far. At last, God, having shown the onlooking universe that Christian would never surrender his faith, no matter how bad appearances might be, gave the nod to one of the eagerly waiting shining ones. Instantly there was a flash of light, and a sword slapped firmly into the desperate clutching hand. "Aha!" cried Christian, feeling his body surge with new strength. From on high and grasping the instrument of deliverance with vice-like grip. "Rejoice not against me, O mine enemy," he shouted triumphantly. "When I fall, I shall rise." And with that, Christian gave him a deadly thrust, which tore the scab off of that old mortal wound inflicted so long ago on Mount Calvary. Screaming in pain and rage, the brute reared and fell back, shrieking out his disbelief. "Ah, no, this cannot be. You were a dead man." Christian, perceiving that his blow had gone home, sprang to his feet and laid into him again, crying triumphantly, "Nay, but alive, for in all these things we are more than conquerors through him that loved us. Take that, foul fiend, ha!" So with latter-rain power, Christian slashed and hacked at the beast so fiercely as to force him into a scampering retreat. "Ah, what's happening?" You come at me as a new man. And so I am, shouted Christian, pursuing Napoleon's head with a slash of his razor-sharp sword. For I have waited upon the Lord, and he hath renewed my strength. I shall mount up on wings like an eagle, and quite put an end to you, defeated foe. Apollyon, in spite of all the serpentine twisting and turning, saw fur and bloody scales flying fast as snow, and soon judged it wiser to part with pride rather than life. Therefore he shamelessly turned tail, crying out, away with me! But unwilling to settle for partial victory, Christian flew at his backside with holy indignation and chipped out a few bloody divots from his scaly back, calling out, What, will you flee from a mere man? Nay, but more than a mere man, whimpered the giant, whose flame had gone cold by reason of his fearful wounds, for you have compassed me with all the armies of heaven. A thing you will do well to remember, shouted Christian with a zinging slash of his sword. For nothing is apparently more helpless, and yet really more invincible, than a soul that feels its nothingness and relies wholly upon God. So say you now in the flush of victory, cried Apollyon finally, limping up enough speed to get him airborne. But it will be a different song you sing when I come to you in the valley of the shadow of death. Adieu, vile follower of the dark force. With that sinister threat, Apollyon spread his tattered dragon's wings and flapped in erratic flight down to the valley of the shadow of death, where he might nurse his wounds. Therefore, for a season, Christian saw him no more. Then, nearly exhausted, Christian fell to his knees and cried out, Oh, thanks be to God who has delivered me out of the mouth of the lion. We'll continue with our reading next time.